In about 2 weeks, Syracuse football will take on the Pitt Panthers in what I believe is a must-win game for Syracuse. It is their last chance to be able to really get to a bowl in 2025. But let's rewind. Let's backtrack for just a moment here. All right. Where is Syracuse football at right now? They're at the midseason point entering their first bye of the year. They are currently sitting at 3-3. And if I told you before the year that Syracuse was going to be 3-3 at the midway point, I bet a lot of you would have expected that. Let's go through, I think, what many of us would have believed before the year would have been the win-loss splits for Syracuse through 6 games. Tennessee in week 1, while we were hopeful, while we were trying to be optimistic, most of us, I think, believed that Syracuse was going to lose that game. So they would be 0-1, just like they were after week 1. Then they would beat UConn, which they did. Then they would obviously beat Colgate, which they did. So they'd be 2-1. They would lose at Clemson instead of actually winning there. But then they would beat Duke at home for their 3rd win to go to 3-2. And then they would lose at SMU. So essentially, I think many of us would have expected that, or it would have expected to flip the Clemson and Duke results. So they would be 3-3. And right now they are 3-3, just not in the way that I think many of us expected they would come to this record. But as I pointed out yesterday in the Fan Reaction podcast, 3-3 is not exactly a good position right now for Syracuse. And I know Fran Brown saying in his post game that, 3-3 is not a bad spot. He actually made a mistake by saying that they're only 1 game off where they were at last year at the midway point. That's not true. Last year they were 5-1 at the midway point. But regardless, 3-3, not really a good spot for Syracuse. On the surface, yeah, all they have to do is do that again, and they make a bowl in 2025. But let's think about this for a moment. For the first time in the Fran Brown era, they are coming off back-to-back losses. First time they've lost back-to-back in the Fran Brown era was last week against SMU. And Syracuse last year, speaking of the bye week, they went 0-2 off a bye last year. Remember those games? You don't want to remember those games. So let's not talk about what happened with Syracuse after a bye. We'll talk about that in future podcasts. That'll be, I think, next week. Okay, next week. With all that said, Pitt after the bye is a must-win for Syracuse football. If Syracuse football beats the Pitt Panthers in a couple of weeks from now, they would be sitting at 4-3, and all this team would have to do, all they would have to do to make a bowl is beat North Carolina at home on Halloween, beat Boston College to close the regular season. And we would look at this year and say, you know what? Maybe this team could have been more. In fact, they probably would have been more had Steve Angeli not gotten injured. But at least they were able to salvage a bowl out of this season. I'm not going to sit here now and say that if Syracuse has a bad year from here on out, that it would kill momentum of the program, because I think many people know what's going on. They know that Syracuse's starting quarterback is not their actual starting quarterback. They understand. At least I would hope. At least I would hope the recruits understand that they have coming in for 2026. But could you imagine if they could actually pull this out and make a bowl this season? That would be nice. Why Pitt, though, specifically is that 3rd win? Well, I'm glad you asked, because if Syracuse were to lose to Pitt, they would have to find a way to beat only one, but still, this is not going to be easy, at Georgia Tech, at Miami, good luck with that one, at Notre Dame, good luck with that one as well. So yeah, it's a must-win game for Syracuse. They absolutely have to beat the Pitt Panthers in order to make a bowl in 2025. And another problem, and we'll go over in future podcasts as well, is that Pitt owns Syracuse. Since the turn of the century, they own Syracuse football. I know we don't like that they own Syracuse football. I hate that they own Syracuse football, but we got to admit the truth here. The Pitt Panthers are 19-6 against Syracuse football since the year 2000. 19-6. They own this team. And last year was a disaster. That was coming off a bye, too. And Pitt's a pretty good team. But before I throw in the towel on the season and say that 2025 is over, I want to see if Syracuse can rise to the challenge and perhaps knock off Pitt on their home field in prime time. It would be nice. But if they do not beat the Pitt Panthers, this is not a bowl team at all in 2025. There is no way they are actually going to be able to make it.